man, what even is a cell? I'm in here writing another script for another science class on this channel, and all I can see when looking at these things is a goddamn robot! If you don't know a lick about biology, I feel like an introduction to cells is in order. You may think that your body is some magical entity that has hyper-complex functions that are incomprehensible to us, but that is far from the truth. Instead, your body is made of millions of microscopic pieces of junk that magically replicate human engineering with microscopic molecules that just happen to all be based on carbon. Cells are basically the microscopic building blocks of life here on Earth. Whether it's a dog, a sunflower, or a cute isopod from millions of years ago, they're all made up of cells. Cells work together to perform a myriad of tasks that make living things living. In order to digest food, absorb sunlight, heal from a cut, or reproduce, living things must contain cells that perform those tasks. However, these tasks don't just magically happen. All cells are made up of even smaller biological machines known as organelles. These organelles work together to allow cells to perform a myriad of tasks by processing different types of biomolecules. Imagine everything in Cruelty Squad, but under a microscope. Although I would love to go one by one for every organelle and explain everything they do in immense detail, I'm not Mr. LaCroix. Plus, that's boring. Instead, I'm going to use my favorite literary choice, known as a simile, to compare all of the organelles in a cell to something that every loser watching this channel can know. A computer! These things are surprisingly similar. Sometimes it makes me fear God. Everything needs containment, am I right? I mean, have you ever tried pouring yourself a glass of water without a glass? It's pretty hard. That's the job of the cell membrane, behaving as a barrier between the sanctity of the cell and the hell of the outside world, articulately controlling what goes in and what goes out of the cell. Does that sound similar to anything? Precisely! It's a computer case. Just like a cell membrane, a PC case protects all the goodies inside, but allows for communication from the cell to the outside world. The cell membrane allows packages to go in and out of a cell to give other organelles messages and commands from other cells. Now look at a PC case. Look at all these USB ports. Look at this DisplayPort outlet. All of these ports allow for data to go in and out of the system, making all kinds of possibilities. Without these, I wouldn't be able to use my super cool peripherals. Or you can use it for that. By the way, Mr. LaCroix, that wasn't actually an explicit Amazon page. It was just a bunch of mice. In order for any computer to work, it needs data. Whether or not that computer is a cell or a PC doesn't matter. In a cell, all genetic data is stored in a cute little ball known as the nucleus. The nucleus holds the DNA a cell needs to function and transmits that data as RNA to other cells to tell them what to do. It is very similar to how computers work here in the macro world. Instead of a circular chunk of nucleic acid, we use a rectangular chunk of magnetic ones and zeros known as a solid-state drive. Hard disk drives are also a good comparison, but they're getting phased out in modern-day technology. Solid-state drives contain all information a computer needs to function at peak performance. It holds the device's operating system, drivers that run the function of different components, and applications for the device to run. The nucleus, on the other hand, contains all information needed to make a cell run at peak performance. It holds and sends instructions to make all other organelles in the cell function properly. These two things are quite literally identical. It's almost uncanny. Okay, this one is a little bit of a stretch, but you gotta hear me out. If a cell were just to have all of the organelles sitting around inside of there, without any structure, it would collapse! This is where the next organelle, cytoplasm, comes into play. It's a magical jelly that fills up the cell that the rest of the organelles sit inside, letting the cell maintain a sense of structure. Now look at a computer. There's no jelly! Okay, that's a custom mod, but it doesn't impact performance at all. So what part of this piece of metal garbage helps it retain shape? Well, looking at it a little closer, there's screws everywhere. In a personal computer, it's not some tasty jelly that keeps it all together, but screws instead. These screws may taste like a Fent Fiend's copper stash instead of tasty mushed grapes, but they perform the same task. Without these screws and standoffs, a PC would be the most unorganized mess ever. Oh, it's the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell, am I right? Weren't those stupid memes so funny back in the day? Just turn up the contrast and now something lol random is funny. Looking for beans at 3 a.m., right? The mitochondria is definitely the most famous of all of the cells. Being the quote-unquote powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria packages up energy and sends it off to other organelles for use. One would think that the comparison here would be quite simple. It's clearly the power supply unit of a computer. Well, that's not entirely true. Aww. There is another organelle that works together with the mitochondria to perform the task of generating and distributing energy, the lysosome. The lysosome is the actual power supply of the cell. The lysosome's job is to absorb food and digest it, turning into usable energy for the body. Just like a PSU turning energy from a wall outlet into something usable for a computer. If I just throw a power supply into a computer though, nothing happens. It needs something to send all that converted energy to the different components of the computer. That is where the mitochondria comes in. The mitochondria acts as the cables for a power supply, diverting energy wherever it needs to go at the right levels and concentrations. One cannot work without the other. So, next time you hear a dirty Redditor call the mitochondria the powerhouse of the cell, call him an idiot and use this video as evidence. We have containment, data, and energy for all of these organelles, but they have no way of communicating with each other. I keep on trying to get these things to speak about their issues, and they just won't say anything. Speak, goddammit! Well, that's where the next organelle comes in handy. The endoplasmic reticulum is a delicious pancake-looking network of membranes that allow biomolecules to move around and reach where they need to go in a cell. It's basically sending signals throughout the entire cell to make shit happen. On a computer, there's a perfect little component that does the exact same thing. The motherboard. The motherboard is used as a means of communication between all other components in the computer. Just plug them in and they'll magically know that you want to make a bunch of kids cry in the new Call of Duty. Well, it's not magically working. The next organelle is needed to actually mark and move around different molecules throughout the cell. The Golgi body is to a cell what a CPU is to a computer. The Golgi body's job is to package up proteins and lipids and send them off to war. Many of the proteins that it packages actually go outside the cell. If you think of these molecules as if they were data in a computer, then comparing the Golgi body to the CPU is easy. The CPU's whole job is to tell other computer parts what to do through the motherboard, just like the Golgi body. And the CPU sends signals to anything connected outside the computer, just like the Golgi body. Thankfully though, the Golgi body doesn't have pins you gotta worry about bending. Vacuoles. Look at these little goobers. Vacuoles are the most simple organelle, in my opinion at least. All they do is store stuff temporarily for use later. Most of the time, a vacuole is storing water or a mixture of water and other biomolecules, sometimes an emulsified solid. When looking at our comparisons so far, biomolecules like proteins and lipids have been compared to the data that's sent throughout the computer. Man, I sure hope that there's some computer part that does this exact same thing and stores data temporarily. RAM is one of the most simple components in a PC. All it does is hold some data temporarily for the CPU to run. A lot of the time, it's graphics and scripts for a website or game. Sometimes it's some other random junk. Sound familiar? Dude, comparing these things to each other is like comparing a rock to another rock. the last organelle. Let's see what we've got here. I think it's a chicken. The ribosomes. Despite the name, ribosomes have nothing to do with playing the vibraphone. Ribosomes play a vital role in protein synthesis throughout the cell. There are so many of these little rats throughout the cell. In fact, their abundance made finding a comparison to these things kind of hard. I had to stop thinking of a ribosome on the individual level and instead had to think of what they all did working together. Then it hit me. Ribosomes are just a GPU. When using the biomolecules are data analogy, a ribosome's job is clear. Its function is to aid in the production of a shit ton of protein, one specific type of data. What component in a PC processes a shit ton of only one specific type of data? It's none other than the GPU. GPUs are literally thousands of circuits doing complex and simple mathematical equations to generate 3D images. However, all that is only one type of data. It's clear as day. Phew, that's a lot of information and not a lot of time. Did you get all that? No? Darn. Here, I'll try to summarize it. Basically, we're living in a simulation and our bodies are made up of millions of supercomputers performing hundreds of millions of calculations every second that we physically can't comprehend. Rather than admiring the beauty of our own existence, humanity is divulging into apathy and destroying one another. Or, in other words, you should listen to the evil megacorporations and just buy the next Call of Duty.